All right, so it is 1 o'clock Eastern Time. It's time to get started. Let me turn my volume down a little so I don't clip out on you guys. Welcome to the Alpha Anywhere Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, and I'm pleased to be joined here by our lead solutions engineer, Dean McCormick, in relation. Dean today is going to give you a quick demo. I believe it has to do with maps today. And then after that, he's here to take your questions. So go ahead and type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. Also, I'd like you to know that today's session and prior sessions are and have been recorded, and you can find copies of those recordings at videos.alphasoftware.com. So let's begin. Hello, Dean, are you there?
Yes, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter.
Excellent.
And you should see a dialog box. And I can see your screen.
Dynamite. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. I have a very quick demo. Wanted to kind of show you, I was working with a client and wanted to kind of show you a cool thing I came across and wanted to share kind of the process I put it together. And it involved a vector-based mapping product out there, free. It's very cool. Also, so we'll be heavier on the Q&A portion. So as Dave had mentioned, please take a moment to go into your questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel and enter in your questions. And remember, during the week, you can always email us at guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com, any kind of questions, and that allows us to get ready to go and rock and roll and have them prepared for you for these so we can do a much better job on it. And we've got some really good questions recently, and we're working on content around those to display to everybody out in the fabulous alpha developer land. So with that, we have just one other quick announcement is registration is open for Alpha Anywhere. The Alpha DevCon 2016. We're wrapping up our walkthrough of the training that will be held the day before. It's coming together very nicely. Dave, I guess you've been really experiencing it, so you may have a comment or two about that. But we're very excited about the training and what it's going to do to bring everybody up to speed on the new mobile optimized forms technology. Any comments, Dave? You don't like it?
It's going to be terrific, and we have 14 technical sessions planned. We're actually splitting this conference into 2 tracks. So for those of you who are less interested in some of the salesy, markety, businessy portions of it, and we're more interested in just getting your hands dirty with code, we've actually separated out the groups. So you can be all tech all the time. You could be some tech, some business. It's completely up to you. And later on, I'll actually show you the URL that you can go to see the conference schedule running as a web/mobile application that you can access just with a URL. I'm going to post that towards the end of today's show. So,
excellent,
thanks,
excellent. Thank you very much, Dave. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into a quick dog and pony show and demonstration. So I'm popping over into my development environment, which is the Microsoft Windows development environment with Alpha. I have a client who is actually, they focus more on the US, but they have some requirements for some really cool mapping capabilities, meaning they want to use maps to select data and do other pieces there. And I did a little research and I came across a very cool piece of map technology called jQVMap.com, jQueryVectorMaps.com. And as you can see, it's available. You can actually go to jQVMap.com to check it out. They have vector maps for the world, for the USA, for Europe, for Germany. I mean, you can get down to, you know, they have the USA with all the states, and then within each country you can get down to a lower. And it's got some very nice effects that are available, like hover effects, click effects, where you can click on it and it will be interactive. And so the idea is like, oh, I want to see the sales in this area, so I can click on there, and then maybe it pops up a window with the sales for that area. Or they take you to a web page which has more detailed information there. Very cool mapping C. So I did a very simplistic kind of integration with Alpha, and I wanted to walk you through kind of the process I went through, and mainly just to kind of, not necessarily to show you exactly how to do it for this, but more importantly is kind of unlock your creativity, because there are an enormous amount of jQuery and JavaScript libraries out there that are available to you to include in your projects, to add and enhance on top of Alpha's extensive capabilities, but capabilities that aren't native. For instance, Alpha does have, really doesn't have this level of sophistication of a mapping component capability. It does have charting and other pieces there. So if you want something a little bit more fancy, you know, this is what you can do. You can actually integrate these capabilities into Alpha, and it's fairly readily. There's just a few steps I go through to go through that process. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I went through the process. So the first process is obviously, you know, there's really good documentation available from these, and most of these third parties actually have GitHub or Git repositories that you can download. And so you can just download the code here via a zip file, which is perfectly fine. Or if you're using something like SourceTree, you can actually grab it directly from GitHub and use SourceTree to bring it down. And what's nice about this, and I'm going to go ahead and click on GitHub and show you what's in there. But what's great about it is here are all the different files that come. The dist, D-I-S-T, is actually where the JavaScript libraries are, the JavaScript libraries that we're going to use are in. But what's great is they include SAMP examples. And in the examples in here, they actually include very nicely done, simple examples, say, to do a USA or something along those lines. So when you download all this code to your local site, you're going to be bringing in examples, HTML examples, that you can use as sort of your guide to develop it into Alpha. So that's often the first thing I do is once I download the code, and I'll go ahead and open it up on my system and show you what it looks like on there. What's going to come down is not only the code, but also some examples. So give me a moment as in the screen. Come on, wake up here. There we go. And so I have my jQuery map. So this is what comes down. You'll notice it's the same as GitHub. I just unzipped this here. And again, what's nice is if I wanted to do that. But then you'll see in here we have examples. And then in here I can actually look at one of these examples, let's say USA, and it's just an HTML file. So let's go ahead and open that up and take a look at it. Okay? So I'm going to open it up with Notepad++, which is what I tend to use when I'm doing work. It's a very nice free editor on Windows, and again it's called Notepad++. So as you can see, this is a very simple example. You basically, this is the HTML. Basically it has some scripts. It's using jQuery, and then in here we have, it's actually pointing to the jQuery VMap libraries, which will grab the data. And then this is the actual script that renders the map, and then this is a little div where the map is going to actually be displayed. So this script is doing all the work, calling these libraries and doing there. So the first step I always take whenever I'm going down this road is I literally take this HTML page, go into Alpha, go to my Web Projects control panel, go into my A5W pages, and I create a page that essentially has the same exact content as that example. You'll notice that this is an A5W page, but it has the exact same content as this HTML page because Alpha processes HTML and A5W. A5W just allows to do scripting kind of scenario. And then once I have that, I can then actually run it.
I'm calling from Skype.
Oh, what's that? I'm sorry?
I don't know, we're getting some sort of audio interference here. Let me take a look, see what I can get here.
It's $3 a month.
All right, hang on a second.
It's most of you that I talk to.
Questions?
I talk to my mom
Audio.
once this week
All right, hang on a second.
Once or twice this week.
It's got to be something.
It's got to be a
here.
video.
It's
Fine.
that's so
I don't
bizarre.
call that many people that know.
I'm going to try this. I'll try that. All right, hang on. I'm going to try reconnecting. Reconnecting. Might be silent for a second. And we're good.
Okay. So the first step I do is I want to get that plain HTML example working in Alpha. That way I kind of know I have everything configured. Now, as you can see, it looked real simple, but there was one step I kind of went over a little bit here. And that is the following, is that if we go back and look at this, you'll notice that there are these JavaScript libraries that we need to use. And you'll notice that they're in specific directories. So what I do is I determine which of those libraries that are needed. I go into Alpha. I go to my Web Projects Control Panel. I go into JavaScript. Where's my JavaScript files? Right here. And I copy those JavaScript files into my project. And you can do that by going to JavaScript files and then click Add File, and then you can search on the disk for those files. So for instance, in this, the files are right here. These are the JVQMap JavaScript files. And I want to bring that data into Alpha, and the easy way to do that is you could copy it from the file system, but I like to go in, just go to the JavaScript area, click Add File, navigate to that particular folder, and then import those pieces here. And then the other thing I need to do, which is very important, is that I have to make sure that I am pointed to where those are in my local project. So you'll notice in their off-the-shelf one, they had everything under dist. It was like go into the dist directory that included with all the files and grab the JavaScript there. When I moved it into Alpha, you'll notice here, and let me go to the Web Projects Control Panel, I actually have it in my JavaScript folder, and those are where I put my JavaScript folder. So now I have to go in here and put it into my JavaScript folder, and so you'll notice that my path looks a little different from theirs. So step number one is when you're integrating a third-party library is reuse their example. Don't try and get crazy. Just bring in their example, and they always provide very nice examples. That's one thing I've been very pleased with a lot of libraries is they give you simple HTML pages, very simple examples, and you bring those into them. And make sure that you can run them within your system. And then once you can run them within your system, then you're in great shape. Notice how I go through here, as I move over these different things, the text down below is changing, and I've got all the nice colors and the nice items located from there. And so therefore I know a couple things. One is that my HTML is configured correctly on my A5W page, that the system knows where to find the JavaScript libraries to actually do the rendering and the interactivity from this, and off to the races there. So it's sort of just a bring it in and make sure it works within my Alpha environment. Now, once I have done that, I can now start having some fun. Now, this is just an A5W page. The reality is I have a UX component where I want to embed not only their stuff but also my stuff, because I'll have a lot more flexibility. So my next step is, once I've got my sort of sample A5W page, now I'm going to go in and actually put this into a UX component so that it will actually display in a UX component. And I have that right here. So I'm in my UX component. It's a very simple component right now, is that basically it has, and I'll walk you through how to do that. So the important things to realize when you're building this and putting this together is that you need to tell in this case we're telling the A5W page where to get those scripts, but in a UX component you need to do the same thing. You need to tell the UX component where do you go to find the JavaScript libraries that will be used to render this. So my first step always is to look at what JavaScript library is required, and one thing I want to note here is that you'll see that we have these JavaScript libraries, but also check this. This is actually connecting to jQuery. This is really important. I want you to take note of this. Alpha, when it has a UX component, automatically brings in the jQuery libraries for you. So you do not need to link jQuery into your UXs. It's done by default. Alpha does it behind the scenes for you. So when you're migrating things into a UX, ignore the jQuery libraries themselves. Alpha will take care of it. So as you can see, I need to bring in these two jQuery mapping libraries into Alpha and into my UX. So I'm going to go to my UX builder. I go to properties, and then I use the search properties function, which is super valuable. So I'm going to click up here on properties, and I'm going to go JavaScript, and I'm going to search, and you'll see right here JavaScript linked files. Okay, So built into Alpha on the UX component is a feature called JavaScript link files, where I can tell the UX what files, what JavaScript files beyond the that are needed in this. So all I do is I open this up and I put that same kind of text you saw before, one on each line. So I'm saying, please include the jQuery of vmap.js under the JavaScript folder, and also please include jQuery.vmap.usa.js. And so those are specified here, so that what happens is when Alpha actually presents this, like when you publish it and when it runs in the web browser, it automatically includes those libraries for you. So you don't have to edit the A5W page that this component is in. It's going to take care of doing all that for you. So step number one is analyze in your thing, in your script, what A5W, what JavaScript libraries are required on this page, and thus in the UX that you're going to need. Then go to your UX, go to JavaScript link files, open it up, and put them in one per row, and you can put as many as you need, and click OK. So now we have a UX component where when it runs, it's going to automatically load those JavaScript libraries so they're available for any scripts that are in my page. Now, the next thing I do once I've got that set up is I look at how this works. So you'll see that basically how this works is that when this page loads, it runs a little piece of JavaScript here to actually render the map. So this is the work that's being done. Basically, it calls the libraries to create this map here. And then what it does, and this is super important, you'll see in here, down here, this is actually where it displays the map in this div component right here. So you'll see we have a div component. It has a name or an ID associated with it, but you'll notice there's nothing inside of it, because when this runs, this little piece of JavaScript will generate the map and then insert it into this area right down here. So I need to have a place on my UX with this in there. So that's the next step, is I've got my libraries hooked up. Now I'm going to look at, oh, how does it represent that in it? So I'm going to go into my UX here. I'm going to go to my controls, and you'll notice I have a piece of static text here. And so let me show you how I did that. Is basically what I did is I came to my UX, I went down here to other controls, and I put in static text. And you'll notice that it's empty. There's nothing in there. Then I went to my HTML editor, and I just grabbed this little piece of div here. And I copied that. I went back into here, and then I went ahead and pasted it here. And so this is just, and I can open it up to look at it a little bit more. So this is just static text, but since it has the little codes, it's going to be interpreted as HTML. So when this UX is rendered, it's going to put this on the page, and thus the jQuery map technology will know, or will have a place to put the map once it's been rendered. And that's a very common design practice, is that almost all the libraries, you pass it a div ID. Since a div is just think of it as a location on your web page, and you give it an ID, so you could have like 3 or 4 maps on here, each one with a different ID, and put 4 maps on there. So this is a common practice, that you'll have a div on there, and the way I can do that is by just putting a piece of static text on there, and then putting the div information in there, and then when this runs, the Alpha UX will create a little div, and therefore the JavaScript will know where to put that map. So step 1, make sure you understand what JavaScript libraries are needed, make sure they're in your project, and then on the UX and the properties, connect it in using the linked file capability. Step 2, if the JavaScript library is going to render the thing, in this case a map, into a location, a div location, you need to add that just by using static text, and usually I just copy it out of the example and paste it in right here. So that's step 3. Now we have that's step 2. Now we have step 3, and that's the final step here, is that I'm going to go back in here, and so you'll notice that first the system is loading up the libraries. It's loading up jQuery too, but we don't have to worry about that. It has a div in my page where it can then insert the thing. And then finally, last but not least, is there's a little piece of JavaScript that happens right here that then actually does the generation. So when this loads, it actually runs this JavaScript, calls these libraries, renders the map, and then puts them inside this div where you need it from that standpoint. And you can see this is where it's I'm not going to get into detail, but the way jQuery works, it says for this area on your interface called vmap, which is a div, go ahead and run this JavaScript and insert this stuff in there. And you can learn more on jQuery. There's great tutorials out there on how jQuery works. It's really, really easy to do it. But what we need to do is we need to run this script also. So all I have to do, and this is very simple, is I copy. Well, first I want to notice where this script is at. It's actually located, where is it? Where's the head? In the head area. So there's the head area up here and the body. So where is, there it is. You'll notice that we have an opening head, then this is all of your library definitions and your scripts, and then you close the head tag here, and then the actual div is in the body area of it. Well, Alpha has a really neat feature, so I can go ahead and highlight and copy this script here. I can go to my UX here, go to my properties, and then up on properties, click the search button and type in head. And there's an area called head section tags. And I can go right in there and it shows me this is information that the system, anything you put in this box here, will show up in the head of the rendered component and page the component is in. So all I have to do is paste that script into here and click OK. And basically what I've done is that when this actually runs, the component will put this little piece of JavaScript in the head and in the head of the page that the UX is running. So step 1, get the libraries. Step 2, make sure you have your div. And then step 3, find the scripts that are in the head that do the rendering and put them in there. Once we have all that, and if I haven't screwed anything up during this there, that's a little end time thing. We go there. We now have our jQuery component running inside of a UX. Pretty cool, huh? And very, very powerful because now I can treat this as a normal UX. So for instance, let's say I want to go ahead and put in a button here, and I want to put in a couple buttons. I want them to be next to each other. So I'll do that. I want these buttons to be above it, so I'll go ahead and put those above. And so let's go ahead and go like that. There we go. So now I can do everything else I need to do with Alpha. So now I have my nice Alpha buttons, but I have embedded in here this nice jQuery script. And by the way, when I click on these things, it's firing JavaScript events, which you can configure. And I'm not going to go through that today, but you can literally tell it when something gets clicked, pass it to a action JavaScript to do something pretty interesting. And same thing here. You can attach JavaScript to these buttons that fires that actually maybe redraws this map with a different things selected or things along those lines. Because now that it lives inside here, all of the JavaScript that works with that map is available, and you can just go on to that button, go to the click event, add that JavaScript. And again, you'll see when you go look at the examples from the vendor, they'll have examples of how to do all those pieces there. Now I want to mention, I want to recap real quick, and then I want to mention one more thing about this that is a little bit more advanced topic. Maybe we can cover in a future one. But this is the following. So step 1, whenever I'm working on this stuff, is sort of a pre-step, is I take their sample and their libraries, move them into Alpha and run them as is. That way I kind of know my environment is set up, that my libraries are there, they're in the right location, I've set up the source location so I can properly point to those libraries. I've got that all worked out before I go into my UX. Then when I go into my UX, I do the following. First is I link these libraries using the JavaScript link library capability. I then see how it's rendering it and put this div into a text box, or not a text box, but a static text component on the UX. And last but not least, I analyze this script right here, and I move that from the head area of this map or this demonstration, and I go into my UX here. I go to properties, and then let's find it, and there we go. Then I go in and paste it right in here. And once I've done all three of those, then I will now have a jQuery vector map with all their capabilities built into it, embedded in mine. And notice that, check it out, as I go and move over here, you're seeing down here the behavior of the different states being listed as I hover over them there. Plus, then I can start adding my own buttons, my own other aspects, and talk to them from there. So that's the overall process, and I do that with almost every library. Get their examples, analyze their examples, get their examples working inside Alpha as A5W pages. Then once I have a feel for it and a comfort level, then I can start building UXs and other more advanced components with Alpha. Now, if you don't want to do this as a UX, you can always embed that A5W page in, say, on a tabbed UI. You can actually pop it open and just use it as is. You don't have to move it into a UX. But once it's in a UX, now you can add other buttons, lists, editors, data-bound things. You can do a lot of really fun stuff at that point in time. Now, I want to mention one other thing before I go ahead and go into the Q&A here, is that when we did this, we went ahead and copied this little script verbatim into our head section tab. Now, the benefit is that it's simple. The downside is that this is a fixed script, meaning that it's going to run the same way every single time you run this UX, because it's really just text that's embedded in the head, and it's going to run every time. So the question becomes, well, you know, you'll notice that when I run this, Missouri, Florida, and Oregon are highlighted. In fact, let me go ahead and show you that. So when I do this working preview, you'll see Oregon, Missouri, and there. Well, obviously that's a big mistake, so we need to go in here, and I'm from Missouri originally, so I'm going to get rid of Florida, and I'm going to put in TX. And again, this is how you highlight TX with a different color. So now I go into my working preview, and much better. And in fact, I also, just to make sure I can get there, is for a long time I went to college in California, so I'm going to put CA. So now I have a map that looks a little nicer. I've got California, Texas, and Missouri all highlighted from there. Been kicked out of every nice state in the country, and so it's really nice from that standpoint there. But you know, as you notice, this is fixed. Every time I run this, I'm going to have the same 3 states highlighted, which kind of gets boring after a while, unless it's something fixed in terms of you could create one map for one region, another map for the other ones, and just have a different UX show up for each one of them. But one of the cool things about Alpha is that Alpha has an enormous amount of server-side events. And so what's really cool about the server-side events is that you can go on here and you can actually spit out your own JavaScript in here. And so what's cool about it, and I'm not going to go in it today, is what you can specify is that instead of having static, you can actually go in here and use XBasic to spit out some JavaScript. So let me see if this will work here. I'll just go eJavaScript is equal to e.javascript plus alert hello. So what I'm doing is in this server-side event, I'm using XBasic here to add a little piece of JavaScript. So now let's see if this works.
You have a typo there. After hello, there's an extra single paren.
Thank you.
Yep.
Saved me a little time there. So let's see if this works. So now if we go in here, we do the working preview. Aha, there, and then it ran. So it ran both my added JavaScript and the JavaScript built into it. So what you're able to do, which is very powerful, is that JavaScript that I showed there, you can actually tell it to run that JavaScript from in here instead of having it embedded in your head tag. And the nice thing is, since this is XBasic, you can use all of XBasic stream manipulation to say, okay, put in the header, put in the states that you want, then put in the balance, wrap that into a piece of text, and then emit it as extra items on eJavaScript, and therefore when this runs, it will run that JavaScript that you've essentially modified on the fly. And I've done that with a number of other ones, like with mapping components and other pieces there, and it works really, really well. So to add dynamic elements to it, so instead of having a fixed script, what you would do is in here, and I usually use on the onDialog render, and this is important for why I do that. This event fires after all of the HTML for the UX component has been computed, and that's important because it's assuming when that script. Remember I told you how I had to paste the div where it would actually put the map in. Well, if I don't have that already rendered by Alpha, the JavaScript that runs is going to get confused and say, wait, there's no HTML. So I tend to not put it on the onDialog initialize. I tend to put these kind of things on the onDialog render. It's sort of like the UX is all ready to go with everything it needs to go. Then I'm going to run this little piece of JavaScript before it actually shows it to the user. And in there, I'm going to modify things on the fly. And so that's the way I approach it. So just to give you kind of a hint of the way to approach that, but the beauty of that is then you can make it, you're using XBasic to basically generate JavaScript that then the browser runs and manipulates the actual chart on, or in this case, map on the screen. So a lot of fun, and that opens up an enormous amount of opportunities because there are a whole bunch of different, very powerful scripting, JavaScript libraries for doing mapping and charting and all those kind of pieces there. So I hope this kind of helps you kind of, it's really the focus was this to kind of give you a strategy for how you go find a cool JavaScript library that you may need and what are the process you go through to kind of figure it out and get it working in Alpha. But once it works in Alpha, you're good to go. And Alpha will, as you can see, renders it great, looks good, works, has all the interactivity that you want. It's very, very powerful from that standpoint. And I hope that's been helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Well, we have a couple questions about that mapping component.
Excellent.
One is, and this is a great one, is what is the actual, you said you were working with a client, and you probably can't give away too much information, but sort of what was the use case for having a map like that?
Primarily is they have a dashboard, and on that dashboard they want to highlight certain states based upon their, if they're on track or not on track. So it's a dashboard application. And they wanted to have the states color-coded that it would be green if they're on plan, yellow if they're not close to it, and red if they're below plan. And therefore, what you can do is you notice in here, and let me go back to the properties and to the fixed. Actually, let me do this first. This is kind of annoying. Let me go ahead and comment this out so we don't keep getting that. So I'll go back to properties. I went to the section tags. And you'll notice in here that Missouri you can tag. So let me go here, RGB hex red color. So let's go ahead and find out what that is. You probably know it by heart. Okay. So I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to change Missouri to be that color right there. And let me make sure consistent. I don't think you need cares. Okay. So let's see if this works. I'm flying without a map, but there you go.
Yeah.
So you can see Missouri has a problem.
A big problem.
It's a big mosquito problem. Maybe Zika. We can say, okay, Zika problems kind of thing. So as you can see, I am manually doing that here. But what I do is in my onDialog render, I basically keep everything from here up the same. I basically keep everything from here the same, and what I do is I iterate through a data table, a view actually, and if the, if it's plus or minus, basically I put in the state name and then the color code, and basically all it does is build up this text, and then I merge all three of those together, spit it out, and then boom, you get a map that is now dynamically color-coded from a database based on the data in there. So if they are below plan, it's red. If they are on, actually if they're on or above plan, they're green. If they're a little bit below, they're yellow, and then if they're below by like 10%, they're red. And so you can literally see there and go, okay, who do I have to go knock in the head to get their numbers up for the next quarter? So that was the thing. And they actually do business all over the world, so we needed maps not only for the US, but also for Europe and other places like that. And this mapping component tended to have the most easy to use, and it's really, as you can see, it's pretty easy to implement. It's very self-explanatory, and it comes together very nicely. So good question.
Cool.
Thank you.
Hey, can you overlay numbers on that map if you wanted to?
That is a good question, and the answer is I don't know. But there's an enormous amount of flexibility. You can just go to jqvmap.com, and they have a whole bunch of cool examples on it. The cool thing too is that haven't done this part yet, is that if I go to like Europe, or let me go to the world map here, and you notice they have color coding there. I click on that. let's see, this one doesn't have interactivity, so let's go to US. Maybe the US has interactivity. You'll notice that I have hover effect.
You see,
So,
yep.
yeah, which makes the map less busy
Sure.
than having all this data over it. So
anytime you have to print something on Rhode Island, it always turns out to be a big problem.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh my God, what's going on there kind of scenario. And so that's pretty nice there. Plus, I can scale this map up so it's the whole page there. Let's see, let's go to Europe. Let's see. You notice that once you've highlighted one, it'll stay highlighted. And I haven't gone down that road, but the idea would be select a state, and then the UX on the right-hand side would show a whole bunch of data for that state next to the map. So you could use the map as a navigation. That's the other thing they're thinking about, is that a high-end manager can click on Missouri, and then it would immediately do a query and update the UX form with maybe some other graphs, or maybe it has some data, or they can enter data into that state, meaning they could go in and type some information in, and then it knows, save it in the Missouri state from there. Let's see. The other one too is that when I click on it, that's what I wanted to show you here, is that when you click on it, there's the hover over, but there's also, it triggers a JavaScript event. And I can trap that and link it to Action JavaScript to say reload the UX with certain data, or update a field and trigger a reload. And that's, again, down the road. I don't have it working right now. But it's a very simple model. And in fact, to show you how that works is that if I go into the code right here, you'll see that there's a little thing in here that says on region click, and it calls this function, and this is the actual JavaScript. Well, you can insert right in here Action JavaScript right in this code so that it fires an Action JavaScript to do something. So they already have a preset like hover over on. They have a whole set of behaviors that are built into the map, and you just add you add in your own little JavaScript to then run it, and it could either be Action JavaScript, it could be JavaScript you've associated. Like, what I usually do is I'll set, based on this, it's going to give me the region code. I'm going to set a field on my UX to that region code, and then say refresh the UX. So then when it refreshes, it looks at that code and says, oh, that's the unique ID. This is the data I need to support. So as you can see, it's pretty simple to go through and integrate these JavaScript libraries, because you just kind of use either Action JavaScript or these little JavaScript things to interface that world to the Apple or Alpha UX world.
Neat. Well, that's a couple of people have asked a few other mapping-related questions, although maybe not specifically about this particular component. One are there maps that go to a deeper level than just the state level? For example, what if they want to get down to counties or towns or zip codes or something like that?
Yes. This particular map does not do that. It's a high-level vector map, but absolutely. And in fact, the only downside is once you start getting to that level of detail, they may not be free. But the way to do it is just look up, what I usually do is I go look up JavaScript map component. And you can see there's 50 JavaScript libraries and plugins for maps. And so it walks you through all the different ones. I mean, even Google Maps allows you to do that. But some are a little easier to use. So this gives you a whole bunch of ones there. We kind of have Google Map already built into it. But like another one I've used before and is pretty nice is AmCharts. Again, it costs you money, but they have some very pretty looking maps. And let's see if this fully shows up there. So, and you have some nice effects where you can click and go to that location.
Ooh, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And I'm not sure what level these guys go down to whether it's got and you can do some other cool things like you can put some of these have more advanced, so you can actually go in and put routing data. So let's say you were doing like a transfer.
Right. Someone asked, well, can you build like an Uber type of application using Alpha Anywhere?
Yeah, and in fact, you could just use the Google Map plugin. I wouldn't even go out and get a third party. I would use there. Just realize that you're limited to like 25,000 calls a month or something like that. But absolutely, an Uber style, which is update the map. You can put an icon on the map, and all they're doing is putting a little car icon on the map, and then every second refreshing where that is based on the positioning that the server is giving them. And that's where WebSockets come in. That's where you would use WebSockets, is that you would have a Google map on your component, your UX component, and basically what would happen is it would transmit a sort of a location information, and then there's a little piece of JavaScript that would just move the pin on the map every time it got that command from the server. And that's exactly how Uber is doing it, is basically they have a central database. It has a location of the driver, has the location of the pickup point, and basically probably every second or so, it's when something has changed, like it will send the information up, like the driver will send their information up, and then what it will do is it will send a WebSocket communication out to the mobile platform and say, please update it. And they filter the messages, so not everybody's getting every message in the world. And Alpha can do that now also. But you can register to get only certain messages, and that's exactly how it's working. But they are using right now the Google map component. So using Google, and in fact, and again, I apologize, it's a little bit of a side, but yesterday I was driving around Austin, and I saw a car with all that stuff on it, you know, the LiDAR and all the sensors.
Cars.
Yeah, but this was an Uber car, because what they're doing is they're going to certain cities, building their own maps, and getting rid of Google because they have to pay millions of dollars every month to pay to Google to get their maps, and it's extremely expensive, especially for the volume they do. Anyway, that said, long-winded, but yes, you could do that kind of scenario. So, you know, I would start with Google Maps because that's built into Alpha. We have lots of examples. It works great. Then what you want to probably look at, if that doesn't work, look for a free library. And then if that doesn't work, you know, if you need something that's very, very more extensive, then like, you know, something where you're doing a weather map or something along those lines, then what you can look at a third-party component, and then you have to purchase it. But it's not that super expensive. So you notice how they're putting these nice little icons on there, so you get a little more flexibility. And I'm trying to think how much it is. Let's see. Go back here. It's not for what you're getting. It's like this. How much does it cost to buy this bad boy? I like free to start out with, you know, and built in. There you go. $140 for a single. For a single website. Yeah.
Oh, but the apps are a little bit more. Single app or SaaS website looks like it's around 1,000.
Yeah, yeah. But again, try to write it on your own how much it would cost you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, charge your end client, whoever that happens to be, your boss, your final there, way to go, kind of thing. So,
yeah,
cool.
Great.
Oh, by the way, they do have a U.S. county map pack. I just noticed that there, that you can get down to the U.S. county data. But I'm guessing there are probably some free ones out there that allow you to do something similar. So just do a little research.
So I'm going to go right to the top of the list of the questions. Since
okay.
The first person asked, how do you ensure that the tool is compatible with new versions of mobile OSs, and what's the commitment to compatibility when a release is made? So in other words, how does Alpha Anywhere keep up to date with the mobile OSs, and how long, you know, do you think it should be compatible? What's your sense of making sure that the apps you build are sort of keeping current with versions?
Very good point. And I don't like being called a tool, so I'm going to take
okay. We're not going to use that term. Yeah.
Okay. No. Well, first and foremost, remember, there's two ways to deploy apps. One is through the web browser. And therefore, that's usually the safest because you're not really dependent on the hardware too much. If it works on on your web browser, it's going to work very nicely on the other. Option number two is PhoneGap, when you actually go to deploy via PhoneGap. And so therefore, to a large degree, we're depending upon PhoneGap for that compatibility layer. And in fact, if you open up PhoneGap, if you go down to the PhoneGap version, we actually support a whole bunch of different versions right out of the get-go right here. And so what I would do is if you go to PhoneGap, they're going to tell you which of these versions are compatible with what versions of OS is out there. And that's a big challenge. Less of a challenge in iOS because there's pretty much 1, 2 versions, and since it's so tightly controlled, we tend to see if it works on one iOS, it's going to work very nicely on plus or minus one version kind of scenario. Maybe an issue if someone has like an iPhone 4 that's 5 or 6 years old, but that's kind of their problem there. So I would look at PhoneGap, look at the PhoneGap version, and they're going to tell you what OSs they've been tested on properly there. The other tricky part is the built-in plugins. With the plugins, they may also have version requirements. So it's kind of layered. There's the base PhoneGap and what it supports, and then you may have a specific plugin that you have to do there. And that's a big topic in the Android world. In fact, a great example of that is that it's tougher to deploy in the PhoneGap world just because there's so many different versions. Samsung has theirs, all those kind of scenarios there. So a couple things are going on, and I want to kind of share that with you. One is that more and more large vendors are starting to say, hey, guess what? These are the Android operating systems we support for our apps, which are 80% of the market. If you're off the road on that, so a good example is Salesforce. Recently, they got so tired of spending so much money supporting every Android version under the sun that they've already started to restrict certain their Salesforce apps to only certain versions of Android, because then they can better effectively test and deliver that to their clients. Secondly, if you're very curious about it, let's say your client has maybe 2 or 3 platforms they're doing. Amazon has a really cool service, and I'm not sure what would be great is to do maybe a session with Chris on this.
It would be. In fact, if you show up to the conference, Dan, in fact, I know you'll be there. There will be a session with Chris on the mobile device farm.
Yeah, it's called the Device Farm, and being from Missouri, it sounds nice. It's got a farm there, so it's called the Mobile Device Farm. And what it allows you to do, this is so cool, and I won't ruin it, but it allows you to basically run your app virtually on machines at AWS, so you can see if it works okay on that particular. So if you have a client that says, okay, I've got half of my crew has iOS and they're on version, whatever, 8 or 9 or 9.0. Then I have half the people who are on Android. Some are using a Lexus tablet. Some people are using a Android
There's Samsung and Acer. I mean, Amazon's got hundreds and hundreds of actual physical devices that are there. This isn't like a hardware or a software simulation. These are actual devices that are somehow plugged into their network, so you can actually test them and see what comes back from them, which is really, really quite amazing.
Yeah, and it was very interesting. We recently had and keep this under, there's actually a free version, but then when you start doing much more testing like automated, and you can set up automated regression testing and things like this, there are pricing elements to this, but you can go in and play for free to a large degree. We had a client where they had a specific device. It was actually an older device. It was like 3 years old or so. And they couldn't run the app. This was on an app we built that was going through the store. But they were the only ones reporting it. So what we actually ended up doing was we went on to the Amazon Web Services, to the device farm. We found that device with that iOS they said they had, or that operating system they had. We ran a test on it, and the app worked great. And we just said, hey, we kind of tested it on the same platform you have, and it worked great. And they ended up doing a update to their device, like a wipe and reinstall the OS. Worked fine. So there's really kind of cool ways to use this. Is that you don't have to run down to Best Buy and buy before we would run down and buy these things to make sure they worked. But you can say, hey, give me a list of them. I can get it. They have almost every device under the sun, and you can configure them as you need it. And you can go in there and run the tests on here as part of your validation to make sure for their particular environment. This is more enterprise, where they've given their employees either iOS devices or Android tablets or something. You can make sure it's going to work there. So it's called Device Farm. As Dave mentioned, I can't wait. I'm going to be in that one for sure, because it's such a powerful tool, especially when you're in the Android world, where it's like the Wild West as far as iOS and hardware and everything under the sun. Oops, did I lose you guys?
You didn't. I'm sorry.
Good.
You're like, oh, I've been talking for 10 minutes and no one's heard me. No.
Well, yeah, I know.
Thanks very
much.
Appreciate that answer.
Okay.
So here's a couple questions. I think we can handle this one in time. Actually, let's do another one first because it's faster. Someone just asked, are there any free SQL Server type programs, not SQL Server Express? Since I remember years ago that one was available. Is there a complete list of client cyber? I'm sorry, that's a different question. But basically, what do you suggest for free SQL Server or SQL databases?
The options I have used are SQL Server Express, which is actually very powerful, can do an enormous amount of stuff. There's just certain things it can do. I think there's built-in encryption in the full-blown, and it will only use so much of the hardware and pump out. So that's the only one I know in terms of SQL Server.
There is, if I can interrupt you, we are working with another SQL Server that runs client-side so that in future versions of Alpha Anywhere it is included in the development environment. This is probably new to you, but it's something that Sarah's working on, our documentation person. And what it will let you do is don't have to worry about using Access for the sample databases because Microsoft has had an issue with 64-bit machines trying to run 32-bit drivers in that there's a conflict. It's a conflict even when they're doing it with their own software, and it's been a problem that's existed for a while. So we've gotten around that by finding this new really stripped-down version of SQL Server that you can run locally for your own testing purposes.
Kind of an embedded version of SQL Server.
But
that's
sorry,
awesome.
I'll let you go back to your preferred
No, that's cool for training because then you can ship it and you don't have to worry about versions and this and that. And, yeah, interesting enough on Access, not to get too far off there, is that I use the online version of Exchange. You know, I have that Microsoft plan where I get their software and I get Exchange and OneDrive and stuff like that. Well, they just switched their plans, very interesting enough. And my plan originally included Access, and now my plan gets rid of Access. So I get every program, OneNote, Excel, Word, etc., but they got rid of it, and you have to go to the enterprise plan to get Access. So my gut feels behind the scenes is they're starting to try and squeeze out Access, to be honest. And, you know, it just doesn't seem to be like there's any desire to really work on Access anymore, which is, you know, why I think that's a great move on that part there. Now, the other ones is obviously MySQL, which is, it's from Oracle. It's owned by Oracle, but they have a community edition, which is free, and you can download that. I'm not sure if they'll ever start charging. I mean, they have the paid versions if you want support and stuff like that.
Well, there is MariaDB.
Yes.
I'm sure you were getting to that. But,
yeah, that was the next, is that the MySQL, oh, no problem. The MySQL folks, the guys who developed it originally and then got rid, you know, and then sold it, they have a new one called MariaDB, and that is basically the MySQL core with some other nice new features and things like that. But it's a open source independent group that's driving that. And so a lot of people are starting to move towards MariaDB. Now, I hear a lot of good things about Postgres. I have not used that myself, but a lot of people really, really like that database. And I think there's also a free community edition for that. And I've heard bandied about is Firebase, which is over kind of a European one. I have no experience with that at all. But that's another, and Firebase is not only a database environment, but it's a whole bunch of other stuff. I think it's owned by Google now. And it's a whole set of services and other things targeted for mobile apps. But really the big three are SQL Server, the, not Community Edition, but the Express version, MySQL, MariaDB. That's where I run into most people who use those kind of technologies or what they're using right now. So.
Terrific. So here is what may turn out to be the last question. It's a little bit involved, but someone would like sort of a high-level explanation of mobile disconnected. First of all, do you have to go with a native deployment? Do you have to use the PhoneGap, for example, if you want to do a disconnected application? And also, sort of how does the disconnected stuff work?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. And you know, what would be nice is actually have a whole session on that to really do it justice. Maybe we can talk in more detail, but I'm going to give you the very high level.
Great.
I'm seeing if I have a pre-made slide, so I'll just throw this one up for right now. Okay. So there are, again, as we mentioned just a few minutes ago, there's two ways you can deploy mobile disconnected. One, or mobile in general. One is through the web browser, so you actually open up the web browser on the mobile device and then connect to the Alpha on the server, and it actually runs there in the web browser. Option 2 is to then wrap Alpha in a PhoneGap and deploy it as a PhoneGap installation on the mobile device. And there's pros and cons for each. I mean, the pro of the web browser is that it's fast. You don't have to go through all the build process with PhoneGap or anything else there. And it does support mobile disconnected capability. In fact, let me do this real quick. Let's see. Okay, hold on a second, everybody. Bear with me, and I'm going to prove it to you right now. Let's go to AirPlay, MacBook. Let's go there. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's go here. And I'm going to go into DevCon. Okay, so this is a mobile application that's running on my iPhone, and I'm just going to go in here. And this is a fully disconnected, and this is what we're going to actually be building at the DevCon. So I'm going to go in here, and you'll notice that it looks like it's the whole page, but really what I'm doing is running this in the web browser. This is not a PhoneGap app. So I'll go ahead and click that, and I'll go ahead and save that. I'll go back to here, and notice what's going on. In my screen, you'll notice that that record that I just edited right there has a little orange caret up in, or a yellow caret in the right-hand corner. That means that that data has been updated, but those changes only exist on my mobile phone here. Now I'm going to tap, and hopefully it doesn't blow up here because I haven't tested this in a little while. You'll notice that when I tap the cloud up in the left-hand corner, the little caret went away because now this data is up on my server, my Giant Killer Demo server, in the database. So, and again, very important is that this is a disconnected app that is running on my iPhone, connecting to a server in Dallas to do the update, but it's in the web browser. I'm not running PhoneGap here. So mobile disconnected works for both of them. Now, there's a caveat to that. Since I'm running in the mobile browser, there's certain limitations to how much information can really be managed in a disconnected fashion with when you're working in the mobile environment. When you're in PhoneGap, yeah, local storage. And so if you're going to have a pretty intensive where you're grabbing a whole bunch of data, storing it before syncing it, then PhoneGap's the way to go. And PhoneGap is overall a lot more reliable than the web browser version, just because it's using the file system and it's just handling things more locally in terms of how it goes. And in fact, one of the cool things you can do now with Alpha and PhoneGap is you can use SQLite to store data in a SQLite database on the local machine instead of having to use JSON in the file system. So there's some different things there. So I'm not going to go much more into it, but I just wanted to show you, here is an app that I built that is fully disconnected. It's running disconnected. I can modify and save those information. I can go here. You'll notice it has a little caret there. Actually, I'm flying without a map, so let's hold this out. Notice I just closed it out and I'm reopening it. I'm going to go in and notice, check that out. I literally closed my browser and then relaunched it. And I do it on iPhone. One cool thing you can do is you can take a URL and make it into an icon so you don't have to actually go into the web browser. And you'll notice that, hey, check it out. It still has my local change here saved, and then I can synchronize at will. So it is very stable and very usable, and to be honest, it's cheaper to go out and deploy this because you literally publish to the web server, give the person a URL, and they're now have a mobile disconnected app ready to go. I don't have to go through all the PhoneGap stuff, which is not terrible, but it's a few more steps, and you have to deploy it and all that other stuff there. So quick and dirty, I know we're out of time, but let's go, actually next week I think it'd be worthwhile to go into a little bit more detail, the pros and cons of the two different deployment methods between mobile and mobile web browser and I think that's a really good question. I really want to say thank you, whoever does. And by the way, check this out, pretty cool here. We've got our new mobile optimized forms, so I can show you how to put together mobile optimized forms with things there, all those pieces here, fully disconnected, operating those pieces here, these kind of things here. I can show you how to do pre-mapping that's built into it. I can also save and save.
Right.
We've got images with, notice the annotations on my wonderful mouse there. We're going to show you how to capture images in your mobile app and then immediately use the ink control to annotate those images and then save it and send it all back to your database via Disconnected, and so you have the core of an inspection app ready to go. And this is really the DevCom app we're putting together and finalizing for everybody for the upcoming DevCon training. So please join us. I think you're really going to enjoy that. You're going to come away dangerous, which is going to be fun. So.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Dan. We are out of time.
Yep.
Recording of today's session should be posted soon to videos.alphasoftware.com. Another thing that you might want to take a look at, though, is the actual link that you got to sign up today. If you click on that link, apparently GoToWebinar is also now making recordings of these sessions available. That just might be a faster way to go for some of you, so you don't have to dig through our library. We do have about 10 questions that we didn't get to today. I'll put them into an email here for Dan, and I know he will handle them next week. Unfortunately, I will not be here. I will be away, but Dan will. So wish you a good week, and hope to see you guys at a future webinar. Take care, and goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your participation.